السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله، الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك وعلمنا من لدنك علما ينفعنا في الدين والدنيا يا كريم. أما بعد, praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and peace and blessings upon Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us understanding of His religion. Inshallah, before we start, we will just mention what we took in the past two lessons, inshallah ta'ala. So in the first lesson, we went over the beginning of Fiqh in Islam and how Fiqh came to this ummah, how the jurisprudence of Islam started and how it was descended until the day that we are in now. The second class, we talked about the four Imams and the four Mujtahids that have schools of thought that are still around till today. And we mentioned a little bit about the usul of every one of these scholars and some of the books that are studied in every single madhab, and then some of the famous scholars in every madhab. We could also add to that one thing that I forgot to mention, which is which madhabs exist in which countries today. So as we know, if you go back to the Islamic world, the countries who have had Islam for many years, most of these countries have madahib that are widespread inside them. So if we start from the center of the Islamic world, you start from Mecca and Medina, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent, then we find that throughout history, Mecca and Medina and Hijaz have had different madahib depending on the time that we're talking about. So in the early days, Medina was following the madhab of Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, because Imam Malik used to be the scholar of Medina. So the people in Medina used to be mostly followers of Imam Malik. In Mecca, later on, you had a lot of people follow the way of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. The Shafi'i madhab was also adopted in Medina later on. So in Hijaz generally, throughout a lot of decades, there was the Shafi'i madhab with some Malikis. The Hanafi madhab also entered Hijaz lately with after the Ottoman Empire. When we go to the subcontinent countries, majority of them are old Hanafi, and you find certain cities keeping the Shafi'i madhab, like Kerala, for example, in India, and Sri Lanka, you find some Shafi'i areas, but the majority would be Hanafi. If you go to Al-Khalij, so the Gulf, the actual Gulf Sea, I'm not talking about the countries, but the actual sea, the countries that were around the Gulf Sea, so what is known today as Emirates and Bahrain and those countries, they were known as different things before. Most of them used to follow Imam Malik most of the time. Until now, you see Bahrain, Emirates, you see the official madhab is the Maliki madhab, the official madhab. The Shafi'i madhab entered into these countries, especially places like Al-Ahsa and others, from a long time ago, and has been very strong in certain areas. But most of the cities that are around the sea would follow Imam Malik. Imam Malik's madhab is mainly spread in North Africa and Africa generally. So that's the main focus, Malik madhab. In North Africa and Africa, so South Egypt, Sudan, most of the African countries, Morocco, Tunisia, those countries are all Algeria, all Maliki followers. The Shafi'i madhab has its stronger focus in Egypt and Sham. So Syria and Jordan, those countries throughout history have mostly been Shafi'i. The Hanafi madhab only came later on of the Ottoman Empire, but the people were generally Shafi'i throughout history. So you have Africa being Maliki, you have those areas, Egypt and Sham, being Shafi'i. Yemen was usually mostly Shafi'i, and part of it was Zaydi as well. So, which is a sub-Shia madhab, not one of the four madhab that we follow. You have also some countries like Dagestan and the countries that are close to Russia. These countries have entered Islam hundreds of years ago, and they are mostly Shafi'i. Most of them are Shafi'i, other than So Dagestan, Chechnya, these countries are all Shafi'i from hundreds of years ago. And the other countries around the area are all Hanafi, of course. So you find the Hanafi and Shafi'i madhab are very strong and very widespread throughout the whole of the world. The Hanbali madhab has less followers than all other madhab. It's usually found in throughout history. It had a few followers in Asham, but not many. And of course, today in the Gulf countries, it's widely spread. Although the Hanbali madhab also has people who claim to be Hanbali but do not follow Imam Ahmad. So there's always that debate when it comes to the Hanbali madhab. But there are a lot of followers in different countries. In the West, we don't find that you have one main madhab in a country, but you find everything in one place. So you find that in the same city, you have all four madhab, you have different approaches, have modern approaches of fiqh, which didn't exist before. That's why we're going to talk about. That's what we're going to talk about in today's class. The approaches that didn't even exist before. When you're talking about Islamic world from the Imams until the last few hundred years, you find that the madhab is clear. Every country had their madhab. But today, in the places where we live now, we don't find that. We find so many different approaches to fiqh and we don't know what they are. So inshallah, today's class is going to be going through the modern approaches of fiqh. Now, this topic is a sensitive topic, but we're not here to criticize anyone. The scholars we mentioned of these approaches are not people we're going to now hate against or attack, okay? Or we're not mentioning the approaches to basically treat them in a way that's not respectful. Respect is there to every single Muslim, let alone the scholars of Islam who spent their life learning knowledge. Yeah, but we in this day and age have been tested by having so many approaches, and most people who come asking questions say we don't know what to do, we don't know what to follow, we don't know what approach we should start studying. We want to start studying knowledge, looking into fiqh, understanding what we can do, what we can't do. And when we listen to YouTube and lectures, we find all different sources of information and we don't know what's right and wrong. So inshallah, this class touch on some of the points in this topic. We can't go through everything, but we're gonna inshallah have a discussion and see some of the interesting facts that exist out there. So inshallah, we'll start with the first slide now. Before we start, it's a nice quote by Imam Suyuti rahimahullah ta'ala. So Imam Suyuti rahimahullah ta'ala says in his book Tazil al-Mawahib, know that the difference between these four madahib is a huge blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a huge blessing. We mentioned it in the first class. And it has a fine meaning behind it that only those who understand can get, basically, in a way. And the ignorant have been prevented from seeing this fine meaning. So some people, they see the madahib differ in something. They see that to be something that's really sad and terrible, and something that we need to change. Imam Suyuti says, and he's saying this while reflecting on the approach of the Imams themselves when it came to difference of opinions. He says, some of the ignorant went to the extent of saying the Prophet ﷺ came with one religion. So where did these four madhabs come from? This question we'll answer in this class, inshallah ta'ala. And we've answered it throughout the past few classes. And we said that the Sahaba, they differ in matters as well. Yeah? It's all differing in understanding the wording of Rasulullah ﷺ, understanding the Quran and how to interpret the Quran Sunnah. The text, no one differs about, yeah? But it's about how to understand the text, how to see the text, how to put the text together. That's the difference, yeah? There was not one madhab even in the time of Rasulullah ﷺ. The only difference is that if you had the chance to go and ask Prophet ﷺ, you could. But if you couldn't, you would ask different Sahaba and they might differ themselves. So fiqh is not supposed to be like aqidah. There's no difference in it. Khalas. We follow one way. Fiqh is supposed to be something that has that flexible approach. Okay. So Imam Suyuti says another ignorant group started to not ask this question, but to prefer certain madhabs on behalf of others in a way that looks down upon a madhab. If someone just feels that his madhab is better than others, he feels like, Hanafi madhab, khalas, it's the best, that's up to him, it's fine. But if he says that in a way that's looking down upon other imams, on the four imams, that is not permissible. That is very dangerous. Why? Because he himself is a muqallid. He himself doesn't have the ability to tell what's right and wrong. All he's doing is following. And a follower doesn't have the ability to tell or to understand what's wrong, what's right and what's wrong. You're just following. So he said another ignorant group started to prefer some madhabs on behalf of others in a way that looks down upon the other madhabs. This has even led to arguments and fighting and turned into jahiliyyah. The scholars of Islam are free from these kinds of accusations. The scholars of madhab would never get into this kind of things. They all accepted the other madhabs and they understood that these were ways of understanding the words of Rasulullah. The Sahaba have differed in matters of furu'. The Sahaba have differed. And this never caused dispute. As it was said, one of the Imams said, ما سرني أن أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لم يختلفوا. I wouldn't be happy if the Sahaba didn't differ. It wouldn't have made me more happy. It wouldn't have been better. The Sahaba just went one opinion. The Prophet ﷺ, when he saw the Sahaba differ, when he said to them after fighting Uhud, go to Bani Qurayza, go, yeah, and don't pray Asr till we get there. The Sahaba all left, and a group of them, when they were on the way, they found that Asr Salah is going to finish, time is going to finish before they get to Bani Qurayza. So they made ijtihad. A group of them said, Rasulullah just meant by saying that, Harya. So we'll pray and then we'll go. We can't leave Salah. The other group of Sahaba said we can pray Asr in the time of Maghrib because Rasulullah gave us an excuse this time. When Rasulullah got there and he saw the Sahaba, he didn't tell one of the groups off. He didn't tell anyone. All he did is got them together and then they went and they continued with the battle together. So the Sahaba have differed in matters of furu' and fiqh, and this never caused dispute or anger between them, nor did any of them claim that the other was incorrect. Now, this concept is taught to us in books of fiqh and books of aqidah even. Books of aqidah. So a very famous line of poetry that most people memorize when they're memorizing the Shafi'i poem Zubad, ومالك والشافعي ونعمان وأحمد بن حنبل وسفيان وغيرهم من سائر الأئمة على هدى والاختلاف رحمة. Meaning, and I can't translate it in the same rhyming way, but I've tried my best. It says Malik, Shafi'i, and Nu'man, meaning Abu Hanifah, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and Sufyan, meaning Sufyan al-Thawri. These are all Imams who have reached ijtihad. And others not mentioned from the Imam are all upon guidance, and their difference is rahmah, mercy. Another book in Aqidah talks about this and says, ومالك وسائر الأئمة كذا أبو القاسم هداة الأمة فواجب تقريب حد منهم كذا حكى القوم بلفظ يفهم. There's a mistake in the translation. Abu Qasim is not Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so there's a mistake in the stream that needs to be changed, inshallah, if it's in the notes. So it says Malik and the rest of Imams, okay, and also Abu Qasim. Abu Qasim is the name for Imam al-Junayd. Imam al-Junayd is called Abu Qasim, and he is one of the scholars in Tazkiyah. So the lines of poetry say, I'll just change the translation, inshallah, because the translation is not accurate. It says Malik and the rest of Imams. Also Abu Qasim, meaning Junayd, are all guiders of this ummah. They all guide the ummah to what is correct. And it is compulsory, it's obligatory to follow unless one of them. This is what the people of knowledge have said and what we understand from their words. Okay, now let's go into modern approaches of fiqh. What approaches of fiqh do we have out there? If we were to look into today's the Muslim Ummah today, we find that there's a lot of approaches. But most of these approaches are not, some of these approaches are not even recognized by the normal Muslims. For example, modernist approaches that say that it's not compulsory to wear hijab, that you don't have to pray, stuff like this is not accepted by any Muslim. So we're not going to talk about those groups. Okay. Also groups who are super extreme and they don't even believe that the four imams imams at all. I've seen people like this in my life. They believe that these four imams are nothing. we're not going to talk about them. All of these groups that we mentioned refuse these kind of extremes. Okay, the groups that I mentioned are all groups claim to be authentic and claim to follow the Sunnah. Okay, but we are going to explore some of the principles of these groups so that inshallah we can understand where these groups stand and where the madhabi approach that we are teaching stands and where it comes from, and why we chose to explain fiqh in this approach in these durus that we have been giving and we're going to give inshallah ta'ala. That's what we're going to go into right now inshallah. Just see if there's any questions. Okay, there's no questions inshallah. Bismillah. I just gave you a few examples of lines of poetry that were mentioned in books of Imams of the Mathhabs. So this is very clear. I'll read a part of a book of a scholar from one of the other approaches, but I'm not going to mention his name, so it doesn't seem like I'm attacking anyone. It's not about names here. It's about understanding or seeing the differences out there, inshallah ta'ala. So this is a very famous book that was written by one of the late teachers of one of the other approaches. It says here, talking about the methodology of his book, it says, since the purpose of this book is to convey the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ regarding prayer, regarding salah, I would not limit myself to a madhab. Okay, he's going to teach his opinion. He's not going to stick to these madhab and stuff. And he goes on until he says, this book, Allah willing, would gather whatever is relevant to each topic from the books of hadith and the books on the differences between madhab, such that the correct verdicts found in this book would not be found totally in one madhab. Okay, and he goes on later on to say that this book has gathered the haqq, has gathered the truth. And if you ask what is the special thing about this book, it is that he has gathered what is not found in the madhab. So he's got the right sayings of everything, put it together. He's got the correct opinion that the madhab were not able to reach. That Imam Abu Hanifah was not able to reach. Okay, the Imam Shafi'i was not able to reach. Imam Malik was not able to reach. But he went through the sayings and he took what he saw was authentic. So this is the approach of one of the scholars of a different approach that we're going to mention. Another book written by a scholar from one of the other approaches, not the same approach, says something very similar. It says that people after the Imams, after them, exaggerated their importance of the Imams, okay, and began to follow them, okay, more and more blindly. Every group thought that it's significant to follow what is found in their school strictly, and to put the statement of the Imams as the same level as Sharia, same level as the Quran Sunnah. Now, no Imam says that the Imam sayings are the same as the Quran and Sunnah. Okay, the Imam sayings are interpretations of the Quran and Sunnah. Yeah. The only thing that you'll find is that they would say that someone who doesn't have the ability to look into the Quran and Sunnah needs to look into the sayings of the Imams before he can look into the Quran and Sunnah. That's what they say. That's what they say. That's what he's talking about. But they didn't say the Imams are like the Quran and Sunnah, like the Sharia. They're saying that for you to understand Sharia, you need to go through an Imam. So take from the Imams, unless you have the ability like the Imams and you're at their level of knowledge, you can look into the Quran and Sunnah once you're at that level of knowledge. Anyway, he also says that the blind observations of the madhab cause the Muslim nation to lose the guidance of the Quran and Sunnah. So the Muslims throughout history have left the Quran and Sunnah and gone to the madhab, as if they're two separate things, as if these madhab are not understandings of the Quran and Sunnah, but they're something separate, and the Quran and Sunnah is something different. If you read the Quran and Sunnah, you're going to get something different than when you get from the madhab. Okay. And he's saying the door to ijtihad is closed, and Sharia became a statement of just Fuqaha, yeah, and stuff like that. After that, these claims, there's so many more claims that I have, but these are some of the things we see. Was this really the case, or wasn't it the case? It's a really important question to go through, but I think we've explained in the past classes that if you look into tafsir, the explanation of the Quran, we looked into the explanations of hadith, 99.9%, if not 100% of scholars who wrote in these fields, were all followers of the four Imams, followers of the Madhab. Okay? So it's nothing about neglecting the Quran and Sunnah, or choosing a different approach other than the Quran and Sunnah. No Muslim ever said that. Yeah? But how do you look at the Quran and Sunnah? Is it possible that we come and what we do is what they call, we claim that the haqq, the truth, is only what we have. We are the owners of it. The understanding of the haqq is owned by us, and it's not permissible for anyone else to understand something else. That's when we differ with these people. Okay, so subhanallah, there've been two main groups and many other groups throughout history who have tried to interpret the Quran and Sunnah and say that they could get the correct understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. In these groups, myself, I've come across, you have more difference, a lot more difference than you have inside the madhab. So people in these groups have written books to basically override the books of the madhab. And what's happened is there's more difference in these schools than you'll find in the madhab. So one of these groups, for example, if you were to study in circles of knowledge in that group, you would find that they mention the sayings of their mashayikh, of their teachers, one by one when mentioning a matter of fiqh. And they say that you shouldn't go out of these sayings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they don't mention the madhab, but they mention their mashayikh's opinions, and they say you should choose from the madhab. One of the people, I remember one of the da'iyas who follows one of these approaches, says that he used to go overseas and give da'wah, and he would tell the Muslims, don't ever go past 3 main shuyukh in your life, modern shuyukh. If you do that, you're never going to be astray. That's all you have to do in your life. Now, subhanAllah, if someone should say you don't ever go past the madhab in your life, or else you'll be astray, they'll say this guy is a big mubtadi. Yeah? But what are you saying? How can you ever say that you're not allowed to go past the madhab? But they don't have an issue saying that about their own mashayikh. Why? SubhanAllah, same thing. Laymen and most people need guidance, need to follow. They can't just open the Quran and Sunnah. So, SubhanAllah, okay. Okay, khair inshallah. So, anyway, SubhanAllah, there's been many approaches that we'll mention inshallah, but the outcome that we have seen after every one of these approaches has been around for around 100 or 200 years. These 3 approaches, we don't find that one approach was able to end difference between the ummah, or was able to make the sharia just one thing. People will differ, and the difference between them for madhahib is much less. Why? Because they agree on the main principles. Imam al-Kawthari says that 80% of fiqh, he's got a book that he wrote. He died a long time ago. He's got a book that he wrote that is called La Madhabiyya Qantaratul La Diniyya. Non-madhabism is the road line to non-practicing religion at all, basically, is what he's saying. In this book, he says that 80% of fiqh between the madhab is the same. 80%. The difference is only in that 20% of fiqh. The conditions, the things, that's the difference. But general fiqh is agreed upon. So that's very important to understand. Anyway, inshallah, let's go into the modern approaches of fiqh. SubhanAllah, a story that really fits into what we're mentioning for this is a story that was narrated by a few Imams. One of the Imams that narrated the story is Imam Sha'rani. He mentioned the story in his book, Al-Mizan Al-Kubra. He says that Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, happened to visit Abu Hanifah's grave. So next to his grave was not a masjid, but close to his grave was a masjid. So Imam Shafi'i got there at Fajr time. He has to pray Salat al-Fajr. When the scholars of Baghdad found Imam Shafi'i was going to pray Salat al-Fajr, what did they do? They got Imam Shafi'i to lead, even though they're not all Shafi'i, but Imam Shafi'i is a leading scholar of their time, so he got them to lead. So Imam Shafi'i, in his madhab, it's sunnah to recite Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim out loud in prayer. Bismillah out loud in prayer. and those who pray with me, always Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, yeah? That's Sunnah in Shafi'i madhab, and other madhabs think that you should say it quietly, and some madhabs believe that you shouldn't say it. There's a difference. And that you should make dua qunut in every fajr. So after Sami Allah min Hamidah, you find them, Allahumma hdina fi hadith, and say dua. After the last rak'ah and fajr, after Sami Allah min Hamidah. So Imam Shafi'i went to Abu Hanifah's grave, and before going to the grave, he had to pray in the masjid. So when he was Imam, he didn't say Bismillah out loud, and he didn't recite dua. He said Bismillah quietly. So in the Shafi'i madhab, you have to say Bismillah, but if you say it quietly, it still counts. You're just leaving the Sunnah, basically. That's all you're doing. And he didn't make qunut dua. That doesn't nullify the prayer in Shafi'i madhab. It's just makruh, that's it. And they asked him why, and he said that basically he could not do so when he was around Imam Abu Hanifa. That's not permissible, and it's not respect of Abu Hanifa to just do something that goes against his teachings. He's not doing something haram in his madhab. He's doing something that is against the Sunnah, but it's also an opinion of the majority of scholars that it's not Sunnah, so he went by that. So you can see the Imams are also very lenient. Another story is, subhanAllah, Imam Ahmad himself, when he was asked a question in divorce, and according to his opinion, the lady and the husband will not be husband and wife anymore, he said to the man, go and ask that halaqah over there. They will give you the answer that you want. They will tell you that she's not divorced. Imam Ahmad himself, he believed that the person was divorced. But according to other fuqaha, she would not have been divorced. So he told them to go, don't ask me, go to that halaqah and ask them and take the answer they give you. Because it's permissible for someone, a layman coming to ask, to follow any imam that is mujtahid. So if he takes that opinion, it's correct as well. So this is the approach that the imams had to these matters. Subhanallah, a very nice story that happened in a very late days is one of the teachers of my teachers, Sheikh Abdul-Rahman Ghuddah, in the picture. He's a great muhaddith who passed away not long ago, rahimahullah ta'ala. He, subhanallah, he went, and he was very famous in the Islamic world. So he was born in Sham, in Syria, and he studied in Al-Azhar and other places. But at his time, he was a leading muhaddith. And he was around at the time when the university in Islamic world started to pop up everywhere. So he was invited to come and teach in Saudi Arabia, and he taught in Riyadh for a long time in the university. Sheikh Abdul Fattah, he went to visit the city of Al-Ahsa, one of the cities that I studied in myself. And that city has the majority of Shafi'i scholars. So when he went to pray, one of the sheikhs, my shaykh, he got Sheikh Abdul Fattah to do. Abdul Fattah is Hanafi, of course. So when he led Salat al-Fajr, he said Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and he made dua qunut. So everyone was shocked. They said, Sheikh, why did you do that? You're Hanafi. He didn't expect you to do that. We can pray behind you even if you don't make dua qunut. He said, I'm just paying back Imam Shafi'i for what he did when he prayed next to Abu Hanifah, and he didn't make dua qunut. So alhamdulillah, that linear approach to fiqh is beautiful. And in Al-Ahsa, I witnessed that you have, subhanAllah, you have scholars from all the madhab marrying each other, attending durus of each other, praying behind each other, living with each other. And if they need to take from the other madhab, they'll take from that madhab. Nothing wrong with that. So alhamdulillah, they live and they coexist. They coexist as one body. There's no fighting, there's no difference. I have not seen that between them in one day in my life. Alhamdulillah. And this is what you see in any city that is tolerant, that has an academic approach to the madhab. You will not find any fighting or dispute. Find them agreeing and benefiting from each other. That's the correct approach to the madhab, and that's the approach that we quote. Not to fight and to just pretend that your madhab is the best and stuff like that. Of course, the other approach would be to only take one opinion and to tell people off if they didn't accept your opinion. Imam Nawawi himself says the scholars have forbid and have agreed upon that it's haram to forbid anything unless it's agreed upon to be haram. So if there's difference between the scholars, between the credible scholars, the scholars who have studied, the mujtahideen, there's 3 opinions or 4 opinions in one thing, you can't go and tell someone off about it. Can't go and tell someone. For example, if someone believes that it's haram to pray 2 rak'ah when you enter the masjid when the Imam is giving khutbah. The Hanafi and the Maliki madhab believe it's haram. You can't do so. The Hanbali madhab and the Shafi'i madhab believe it's sunnah to pray 2 rak'ah. It's sunnah to pray 2 rak'ah. So, and today I've seen myself many times. You find the khatib giving khutbah in some countries, someone enters and sits down, he's Hanafi or he's Maliki, they'll scream at them in front of everyone. Scream at them, get up and pray. Get up and pray. Okay. And if you tell them off about screaming, they say, didn't Rasulullah tell that Sahabi who entered the masjid to get up and pray? Okay. When he was giving khutbah, he said, get up and pray. The Hanafis and the Malikis know this hadith, but they have a different interpretation of this hadith. They say this hadith was a special case for that one Sahabi for a certain reason that was mentioned in the hadith. So they have their own interpretation of hadith. They don't know this hadith. This hadith is clear. Anyway. Subhanallah, that's the approach that the Imams of the madhab have all had in fiqh. Food for thought. So, has leaving the madhab led us to unity amongst the ummah? We're in a day and age that people have left the madhab, generally. Not everyone, but a lot of people. Has it bring unity to the ummah? You know, some countries used to have one madhab that everyone follows. And you can see that in a lot of countries. Maybe if you go to Turkey now, people pray in a certain way. All people, they don't know anything else. That's it. Countries that haven't been influenced by anything outside, they pray a certain way, they do things a certain way, that's it. And people are happy with the religion. They do things in a systematic way that makes sense to them. They don't know anything else. And alhamdulillah, they meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Has breaking this up and just throwing different opinions to the general public bring us unity in the ummah? I know that I've heard in some countries I've heard that I visited that the old people would say that deen has changed, the religion has changed. When we were young, we used to know one way. Now there's all these different things happening. We don't know what to do anymore. Subhanallah. So following opinions of the Imams is really a mercy towards the Ummah, because many people don't know what to do if they didn't have that. Another question: how many madhabs have we ended up today? You can't count how many opinions we have out there today. Yeah. Subhanallah, how many fatawas, how many things. People come to me every day. This Sheikh says that, this Sheikh says that. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to believe anymore. And they start doubting their religion. So this is all an effect of having so many madhab. And not if you just had 4 opinions or 3 opinions, because these 4 opinions, the 4 madhabs, they don't differ in everything. Usually you're not going to have 4 opinions. You're going to have 1 or 2. Subhanallah. So there's really not much difference out there. Anyway, another question. Are there any qualified mujtahids that have reached the level of the 4 Imams who are able to go and bring new fiqh out there today to create new madhabs? If you have the credentials, create a new madhab. But you have to have the credentials, yeah? You have to be able to do that. The conditions mentioned in usul al-fiqh, detailed conditions, need to be there. Is that there or not? Another question that we need to think about. They're not going to answer this, yeah? I'm just food for thought. Also, do we need new fiqh? Okay, to cope with modern life, new fiqh, new invented fiqh that was not there before. Does our religion need new opinions to come up? Or do we need to get the new masail, the new matters that happen in our culture today, and find the opinions according to what would be mentioned in the books of fiqh? So do takhrij, that's what the 4 madhab do. And then when we have the opinions of the madhab in these new matters, then we have different choices in those matters. Alhamdulillah. So we never need to invent new fiqh. That's also something else that we should think about. Okay. So the 4 Imams and their followers, like I just mentioned, all except other madahib. Other madahib, meaning the other 4. So every of the 4 madahib except each other's. And believe that they could be more accurate than their own madhabs. So Imam Shafi'i doesn't say that my fiqh is the only way. He believes that Abu Hanifah could be right. As Abu Hanifah said in one of the narrations, what we say is an opinion, and it's the best that we could have done. It's the best of our ability. Whoever comes with a better opinion should be followed. So Abu Hanifah says that himself. Imam Shafi'i himself says, my favorite moment is when someone beats me in a debate, when someone's opinion becomes stronger than mine. So they have no opinion, no problem accepting that. Also, these madahib are not just Also, these madahib are not only four imams talking and giving opinions out there, but these four imams have set the rules. And you have hundreds and hundreds of imams throughout history. Okay, throughout history, what are they doing? They are working for these madhab. So you have a team of scholars in every madhab that just grows and grows and grows, working for these madhab, proving that these madhab are built on Quran and Sunnah, showing the evidence of these madhab, bringing in the new matters that haven't occurred before, and showing their proof in the madhab. And the imams of language, of the Arabic language out there, that we study their books in grammar, in sarf, they're all followers of the madhab. The imams in tafsir, same thing. The imams in fiqh, of course, usul al-fiqh, in aqaid and everything, these are all followers, and these are all people who used what they have, their specialties, to basically to help the madhab that they are under. What are the modern approaches in fiqh we have out there today? We're going to mention three, inshallah ta'ala. And like I just said, this is not to attack any group. This is not to attack any group, and it's not to look down upon any group, and it's not to talk bad or to think bad about any group. The scholars say that it's haram for a Muslim to look down upon any other Muslim out there, no matter who that person is. So we're not hating anyone or calling them out, but this is an academic class, inshallah ta'ala, for us to benefit and understand what's out there when we study fiqh. So the first approach is the madhabi approach that we've been talking about for the past two classes. The second approach, and this is called in modern day academic writings, they call it orthodoxy or traditional Islam or neo-traditionalism. We have fiqh al-dalil approach. So the school that believes everyone needs to look into the dalil, look into the Quran and Sunnah themselves. Yeah. So if you see the opinions of fuqaha, you can't just take the opinions of fuqaha because they're fuqaha and they are credible. You have to go back to the Quran and Sunnah, and you have to choose according to your understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. You can also call this approach of tarjih, if you want. And then the third approach is the maqasidi approach. You can call it the facilitative approach of fiqh, meaning that it's an approach that tries to look for what's suitable, the easiest choice out there, and make sure that the fiqh goes with that. These are the three main approaches that you'll see out there today. Okay. First approach is the madhabi approach. We've talked about this a lot, but inshallah, just quickly. Some of the principles that are followed by the madhabi approach is, number one, that it's permissible to follow a madhab, in your actions. Whether you're a layman or you're a person of knowledge, but you haven't reached the stage of ijtihad yet. You haven't reached the state of the imams. If you're able to do ijtihad in the madhab, that's not enough. You have to be able to do ijtihad in the Quran and Sunnah. If you haven't, even if you're a scholar of fiqh, you're still allowed to follow a madhab. It's not haram to follow the opinions of the fuqaha, according to this approach. And you don't need to look into the dalil yourself in every madhab. Also, they believe that the four madhab are preserved and have fulfilled the conditions to be followed. So they're all acceptable. You can't say the Hanafi madhab is wrong, Shafi'i madhab is wrong, Hanbali madhab is wrong, Maliki madhab is wrong. You can't say that. Also, they believe it's haram, like I mentioned, to look down upon the madhab in a way that disrespects them. Also, it's not permissible for an average layman to put himself in the shoes of the imams and decide what's correct and what is incorrect. Decide what is correct and what is incorrect. Maybe a layman would choose a different opinion sometimes if he needed to, or okay, that's a different story. But he can't decide what's correct and what's incorrect. He can't make the judgment. Also, that fiqh is only to be learnt in the orthodox method with narration until the first generation. Like we mentioned, there's an isnad in fiqh, and you have to study in a systematic way. Study certain books in fiqh. You can't just take fiqh from reading the Quran and Sunnah, that's it. There's an academic approach to fiqh that needs to be followed if you want to become a faqih. Okay. Where would we find the traditional approach? Some places. Okay. You find that, for example, many places. I'm just going to give a few examples. In Al-Azhar, for example, as Al-Azhar is there. You can find it in Al-Zaytuna. Zaytuna, of course, is the oldest university in the Islamic history in Tunisia. You can find it in places like Dur al-Ulum in India and Pakistan, in those countries. Ma'had al-Fath, for example, in Syria, it's another place. Many other, usually in Syria, most institutions in Syria all follow the madahib, they don't follow anything else. The Mahdara system in Mauritania, so in the desert, when people go into different tents and they study fiqh and stuff, they follow the Maliki madhab. The old madrasa system that we have in countries, this all is a madhabi approach to fiqh. To teach the madhab, usually. Okay. After that, some scholars from the madhabi approach, inshallah. Some scholars, and these are only a few that I haven't picked for any certain reason. Just most of these scholars have books on the madhab, on following madhab. That's why I mentioned the names. Like I said, Mawliullah Dahlawi, he was one of these scholars that were mentioned in the earlier deaths, and he was a scholar of India, and he was one of the great scholars that everyone looked up to from all the three different approaches, actually. You have Muhammad Zahid al-Kawthari, Abdul-Fatah Ghuddah, we mentioned his name just before. Sheikh Muhammad Said al-Ramadan, you have Muhammad Ali al-Maliki, Muhammad Yasin al-Fadani, who's the Muhaddith al-Haramain. Also, I mentioned one of the modern scholars who's still alive now, Sheikh Abdul-Aziz Shahawi, the first picture with myself there. That was in Al-Azhar this summer. So Sheikh is, subhanAllah, one of the scholars who's still alive now, but he has studied the madhab in a way that doesn't really exist anywhere else in the world today. So he's memorized books in the Shafi'i madhab that used to be memorized by the students of Sheikh al-Islam Zakir al-Ansari and others that are not memorized today by anyone. And he's got probably one of the highest chains in the Shafi'i madhab in the world today. So anyway, subhanAllah, there's a lot of scholars out there that follow the madhab, and you can find them in most of the Islamic countries, alhamdulillah. Okay, let's go into the fiqh al-dalil approach, the second approach. Fiqh al-dalil approach is a modern approach that is built on taking the rulings immediately from the Quran and Sunnah without regarding the detailed principles of usul fiqh mentioned in the madhab. They might read books in usul fiqh, but the principles that we mentioned, 1, 2, 3, 4, the way the madhab see it, in the order they see it, they don't strictly follow it. But they believe that you can take from the Quran and Sunnah even if you are not mujtahid. Now this approach is modern, but it has been influenced by a few individuals throughout history. There's been attempts throughout history to do a similar thing, okay? You have, for example, Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi. Ibn Hazm is a very well-known scholar of Andalus, who used to be a Zahiri. So he would be a literalist, basically. And he used to believe it's haram to follow anyone, including himself. And everyone needs to make their own ijtihad. Every single Muslim needs to have their own madhab, basically, that only they themselves can follow. And the scholars in time refuted his works, of course, and even the Dalil approach doesn't follow Ibn Hazm. They don't go to that extreme. But it's influenced by him a lot. They take a lot of his opinions. Because his opinions usually they match the literal understanding of the Quran. So you can open the Quran, see the wording, you take the ruling straight away. That easy. That's why they take a lot from him, even though they don't follow him, of course. You find a similar opinion held by the Zaydi madhab. It's not one of the four madhabs. It's a Shi'i approach to fiqh that exists in places like Sana'a, places in Yemen. So it's a Shi'i approach to fiqh. One of the sub-Shi'i schools is the Zaydi school, and they are the closest to Sunnah, so they're not extreme. They're closest to Sunnah. They believe that the Sahaba are all Muslims and stuff like that. So their approach to fiqh is similar. It's similar to that as well. And this school of fiqh dalil has been influenced by them a lot, to the extent that the majority of followers of fiqh dalil today study books of Imam Shawkani and Imam Sa'ani. These two were scholars of the Zaydi madhab. This is not known. People teach their books think that they were followers of the dalil approach. It's not true. They were followers of the Zaydi madhab when it comes to. Okay. Where would you find fiqh dalil, for example? Okay, you find a lot of Gulf institutions, a lot of universities in the Gulf follow this approach. Not all. So you might find madhabi approach in the Gulf as well, Hanbali fiqh, some Shafi'i fiqh, but a lot of institutions follow the fiqh dalil. So they have a book, it mentions all the sayings, and then they choose the saying according to the dalil. The Maj in Yemen, for example, the Ahlul Hadith movement in India. So that's India is mostly Hanafi. Then you have a group that's known as Ahlul Hadith, and they clash with the majority of Hanafis out there. People like Siddiq Hassan Khan, he was the ruler at his time in India, and he was a very strict non-madhabi, and he attacked the Hanafi a lot in his time. Albani, Abu Bakr Zairi, Ibn Baz, Ibn Uthaymeen, people like this were all, some of them were closer to madhab than others, but they generally followed the dalil approach. They would, in their fatawa, they mention the dalil and that they choose this opinion according to the dalil, and that's it, even if it goes against the four madhab. What about the maqasidi approach? The last one. The maqasidi approach is the most modern. Okay, so doesn't have roots that go back to Ibn Hazm and others. The maqasidi approach is something that I haven't found any example in history that gives an approach like this. And they believe that themselves. It's not something that they run away from. Okay, this approach is modern, and it came, they say, to fix the problems of the ummah. So a new fiqh that is invented to basically be a solution for all the dispute and difference, and the ummah being living in the old generations and not being modern and new. So this approach agrees with fiqh al-dalil in it not abiding to a madhab. They say you shouldn't just follow a madhab. That is not enough. But they don't believe that the sayings of the madhab don't carry that much weight. Okay, they believe these sayings are fine. These sayings can be taken from, but how do you choose? Pick and choose between these sayings. They pick and choose, or they're scholars, not their name. They're scholars of this approach. Pick and choose according to the maslahah, according to the general rulings that help the Sharia grow and Islam be widespread and facilitate for Islam to spread everywhere and for Muslims to be the leading nation. That's what they believe is. So they focus on, like I said, facilitating the most practical sayings mentioned in fiqh of the madhab. Okay, even now, if they don't find the saying, if they find the saying in the form of madhab, that's great. If they, and we're pretty fine with that. If they don't find the saying in the form of madhab, okay, then what do they do? So, for example, one of them gave a fatwa. A lady asked him, she said, I have accepted Islam in France, and my husband is not a Muslim. And if I leave, there's problem. So he looked at the madhab. There's nothing that says that a non-Muslim can stay with a Muslim. He gave a fatwa that according to the maslahah, that she can stay with him. That she can stay with him because it's too hard for her to leave and stuff like that. This goes against the ijma', the agreement of the scholars of this. Another fatwa says that can a Muslim inherit a non-Muslim if they're living in the West? The answer was yes, they can, so that a Muslim can be stronger and more wealthy, even though it's mentioned in the hadith that Prophet said, La yarith al-Muslim kafir. Muslim cannot inherit from a kafir. And all the madhahib agree upon that. So when the facilitating approach doesn't find its grounds in the madhahib, then they might go and they would look for any opinion mentioned in the history of Islam, even in a weak book, not in the madhahib, any scholar throughout history from day 1 to 2, whether they can be followed or not, and take that opinion. If they can't find anything in that, then they might go into their own ijtihad and start to make up and to look into the Quran Sunnah themselves again. So this approach is the most modern, like I said, and it doesn't agree with the past 2 approaches. Some scholars of this approach, like I said, I'm not looking down upon any of scholars of this approach. This is just academic. So in this school, of course, you know that they have the grounding in usul al-fiqh is better. Also, they consider sayings of the madhab, but they don't limit their opinion to the madhab. You find people like Muhammad Rashid Rida, very famous scholar who was one of the founders of this opinion, this approach. Muhammad Rashid Rida, at his time in Egypt teaching the madhab, he rebelled basically against the madhab, and he started a new approach. Him and others at his time. People like Muhammad Ghazali, not Imam al-Ghazali, yeah, that's a Shafi'i scholar, but Muhammad Ghazali, the modern one, and also Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, may Allah bless him, was a great da'iyah lot of work for Islam. We're not saying that these people didn't do a lot, yeah? Even the other ones we mentioned, we're not saying that they didn't spend their life in da'wah. We're saying that these are the approaches in fiqh. So when you study fiqh, you need to be aware of what's out there. Also, places like the European Council Board of Fatwa, they usually, not all of them, but usually the majority of the scholars in that board, they tend to follow the maqasid approach of fiqh. You find them mentioning different opinions and different approaches and trying to find the most facilitative approach. Where do these approaches disagree? And where do they agree? Okay. The main points of disagreement are two. Okay? The main points are two. Abiding to a madhab, is that permissible or not? Okay. So we're not saying it's compulsory to abide to a madhab, but is it permissible or not? That's where they differ. Should you do it or not? Is it okay or not? And the second thing is al-ijma'. Al-ijma'. So the agreement of the scholars of Islam. There's a lot of difference when it comes to these 2 points. There's other points of disagreement that we mentioned, but these are the main 2, inshallah ta'ala. So let's look at these points and some sayings of the scholars of these different approaches when it comes to this. The madhabi approach. You find that people like Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghuddah, he is a madhabi scholar, says in one of his books, today the only agreed upon opinions out there are the opinions of the madhab, Imam Malik, Abu Hanifah, Shafi'i, and Ahmad. The scholars of Islam have all agreed upon not accepting any other opinions, even from mujtahideen whose madhabs were not preserved since the 8th century of Islam, when the madhab of Dawood al-Zahiri ended. So after the 8th century, about that time, there was no more followers of the other madhab, no more books. We don't have chains of narration that take us back to them. So if we did, we would be able to follow them. But because we don't have chains, we're not sure, and these madhab don't have clear usul that we can use to rely on. So it's not about just these 4, but it's about whatever we have clear chains of narration to rely on. That's what it's about. This applies to whenever one follows the imam strictly, or he follows an imam and takes from other imams. That's fine, as long as you are following the opinions that are narrated. Okay. From the fiqh al-dalil approach, we have an Albani, rahimahullah, as an example. He says in his book Silsilat al-Ahadith al-Da'ifa, he talks about the narration that says that the difference between the ummah is rahmah, is mercy. Okay, and this, we don't have a clear chain that says this is a hadith, but the scholars say it is a correct saying. Yeah, so the scholars don't claim to be a hadith, most of them, but they say it is a correct saying. The meaning of it is correct. And Imam Suyuti does say that it possibly could be a hadith, and that the chains of this might be found in some of the ajza, some of the books that are not famous in hadith, but it doesn't have a famous chain that we are aware of. So did Rasulullah say it? Did he not say it? Allahu a'lam. But it's not a clear hadith that is mentioned in the books of hadith. Anyway, he says about this hadith, and he's focusing about this narration. He says there's no authentic chain that says that the difference amongst the ummah is mercy. And we say yes, there is no authentic chain. We agree with what he's saying here. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And he said that one of the bad effects of people believing in this hadith is that many Muslims accept the differences that exist between the 4 madhab, and do not try to go back to the Quran and Sunnah as the Imams wanted them to originally do. And that they are like different religions. They might have like different religions, okay? He later on goes saying that if a Muslim from the 4 madhab's time till today had seen difference to be a negative thing, okay, like the Quran says, and like the Sahaba used to believe, according to his opinion, okay, then they would have strived to establish agreement. And they would have been able to do it in most matters, not everything, in most things, because the dalil is clear. According to Al-Albani, the dalil is clear. So he believes that the Hanafi's opinions, the Maliki's opinions, that there's some things they disagreed upon that shouldn't have been disagreed upon. To him, it's clear that some of them have made a mistake. Like I said, the Madhabi approach says that no, it's not clear, and that the interpretations of the hadith are all correct when it comes to the Madhab, and we can't say that this is wrong and that is wrong. And the Imams themselves didn't say that. The Imams themselves. So even if you become a mujtahid yourself, you're not allowed to say these are wrong or these are right, because it's only an opinion that you have. Your opinion is not better than the other Imam's opinion when it comes to fiqh. Okay. The Maqasidi approach. Al-Qardawi says in his book Al-Ijtihad, he wrote a book called Al-Ijtihad. He said, if you were to look out there, you will find three approaches: extreme approach, moderate approach, and an easygoing approach. Okay. Then he said the extreme approach is found on two schools, and then he mentions the madhab is called to be one of the extreme approaches, according to Al-Qardawi. He said they still believe in following one madhab and not permitting to leave it. Now, this is not accurate. I'm not attacking Sheikh Yusuf, rahimahullah, but it's not accurate that they forbid to follow anything else. Yeah, I have teachers from all four madhab, and they all take from other madhabs when they need to. There's nothing wrong with taking from the other madhab when you need to. So they don't forbid following anything else. This idea that they forbid is out there a lot, and it needs to be addressed because it's not that way. He said they still believe in following one madhab and not forbidding to leave it, and the new matters that occur can only be derived according to madhab. Especially the late madhabis like Al-Hidayah, one of the Hanafi books that we mentioned, Al-Kanz in the Hanafi school, explanations of Khalil in the Maliki school, explanations of Minhaj in the Shafi'i school, and Iqna' and Muntaha in the Hanbali school. These are all approved books in the four madhab that are used and taught till today. So he said these people can only derive rulings of the new evolving matters according to the madhabs, and if they can't find the ruling, they make it haram. Is that true? No. We don't just make it haram if you can't find the ruling in the madhab. There's no ruling basically that you can't really find the ruling of, but if you were to find something you don't understand, there's certain steps that the scholars have mentioned if you can't find the ruling in the madhab. There's still certain steps. For example, the Hanbali madhab. In their madhab, if you can't find the ruling, what do? Go to the Shafi'i madhab, not the ruling in the madhab. SubhanAllah. So the madhabs do have that. And then in some cases, if you can't find the ruling, the scholars will mention that it's halal. So it's not always just haram, but anyway, this is just his opinion and how he sees it. Okay, so I'm only correcting the points that are not accurate according to the madhabi approach, not refuting what he's saying. I'm not here refuting, I'm just giving an academic explanation of this all. Okay. All right. So that's the first issue, following one. What about ijma'? Okay. So the madhahib are built on usul, fundamental principles, like we said in the first class, or the second class, that were established over thousands of years, and they mention usul al-fiqh. So usul al-fiqh is the science that mentions the principles of fiqh, how to get fiqh from the Quran and Sunnah according to these madhahib. Okay. And usul al-fiqh was established and started by Imam Shafi'i himself. Abdul-Rahman ibn Mahdi, one of the leading scholars of hadith in his time, he sent a message to Imam Shafi'i and requested Imam Shafi'i to put together the principles to understand the Quran and Sunnah, to understand Sunnah. He said that it's hard for us. We are muhaddiths, but we get confused sometimes. So Imam Shafi'i wrote a book, Al-Risala, and he mentioned the principles to deal with hadith and Quran and how to understand it. So every madhab has tens of books, if not hundreds, written in usul al-fiqh. Okay, mentioning the reasoning behind the usul of every madhab and how this asl is used to get rulings from the Quran and Sunnah. An example of a book that gives you an overlook at usul fiqh. It's a very high level in usul fiqh, and it talks about all the madhab. Is Jam' al-Jawami' by Imam Subki. Imam Subki is one of the late Shafi'i scholars. Okay, Imam Subki put this book, Jam' al-Jawami'. When you study usul fiqh, you start with books like Waraqat, small books. Okay, then you go to books like Ghayat al-Usul. The fourth or fifth book you might study in usul fiqh, if you're studying under a proper scholar, could be Jam' al-Jawami'. Okay, Imam Subki put it together from over 1,000 books in usul fiqh, just in usul fiqh himself, from the different madhab. So this book has the subhanallah, the most important facts that you can find in usul fiqh that way. Some of these principles were mentioned in the first class, but not all of them, of course. Okay. What about the dalil approach? So the dalil approach has benefited from the books of usul within the madhab. They do read these books, but do not abide by them fully. Okay? So they believe that usul al-fiqh and madhab are too extreme in certain areas, and that it might go against their understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. So they don't take these usul to use to get the Quran and Sunnah, but they take them as general, they benefit from them, and they take from them and they leave from them as well. Some more extreme approaches inside the Dalil approach, because you have people in the Dalil approach who abide by the madhab a little bit. You have others who disagree 100% with madhab. Yeah, there's a spectrum. Some of them have gone to the extent of saying that usul fiqh is a bid'ah. Okay, it's a bid'ah. It's a huge science. It's a bid'ah, and they've started to write usul fiqh according to their manhaj. So you have a book, very famous book that is called Usul al-Fiqh ala manhaj Ahl Sunnah. Ahl Sunnah meaning that they follow the madhab, not Ahl Sunnah. Okay, which is a huge claim. Say they follow the madhab, but not Ahl Sunnah. They're not followers of the Sunnah of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the book is called Usul al-Fiqh according to the approach of Ahl Sunnah, people of the Sunnah. And he basically took out what he believes from the madhab doesn't match with what he sees in Usul al-Fiqh. And there's another book called Usul al-Fiqh ala manhaj Ahl Hadith, which is a very interesting title. Anyway, the majority of them don't go to that extent because they say that to be respectful of the scholars of Islam, they just go and write a new book, make up a new science. Yeah, but like I said, they read usul al-fiqh, but they don't abide by it strictly the way the madhahib do. Okay. Let's go into the the Dalil approach. Okay, we can still go into the Dalil approach. So, an example of matters that modern Dalil approach scholars have differed with the scholars of Usul al-Fiqh is believing that ijma', like I said, ijma', the agreement of scholars, is to be understood the way it is. A lot of scholars from this approach, most of them, say that ijma' is only counted if it was done at the time of the Sahaba. The Sahaba agreed upon something, we can accept it. If the scholars after the Sahaba agreed upon something, it's not enough. And by this, they have rejected a lot, if not majority, of what is mentioned in the books of ijma'. Books of ijma'. So you find matters of fiqh that have no difference in the history of fiqh. And then they go and give a fatwa against it because they don't take that to be ijma', which is basically creating a new opinion or trying to find an opinion that has died out and the scholars have all left. Imam Ghazali says clearly, he says that if the scholars of Islam agree upon opinion for one moment, even if it was today, and there's mujtahideen alive, it's compulsory for us to all follow that opinion. Because it is impossible that the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the scholars of that Ummah, are going to agree upon something that is incorrect. Anyway, so ijma' is one of those issues. Albani, rahimahullah, goes to the extent of saying in his book Adab al-Zifaf that ijma' is something that cannot be imagined or proved to have happened, which is a very big claim. The madahib say that ijma' is two types: ijma' qat'i, ijma' dhanni. Ijma' that has no dispute about it, that is clear, and that is only on a few matters. And if you were to go against it, you become a kafir. And then there's ijma' dhanni, that we have proof for, but is not as clear as the other ijma'. And if you go against that ijma', you become a mubtada', but you don't become a kafir, of course. So ijma' is two types in the madhab. Anyway, he says that ijma' cannot be proved to have happened throughout history. And we could find similar arguments not inside the madahib, but from other schools that are not in the traditional schools, like the Mu'tazila. Some of them, not all of them, some of them have similar arguments. The Zahiris have a similar, Ibn Hazm has a similar argument, and the Zaydis. Like I said, the Zahiris and Zaydis, they take a lot from them. Many fatawa have been built upon dalil and they don't abide with what the madhab says ijma'. For example, you have fatwa that blood is pure, the blood is tahir, is pure, that you can pray even if you are drenched in blood from head to toe. Yeah. Now, more than 35 scholars throughout the history of Islam, being scholars, have mentioned that blood is impure by ijma'. Imam Ahmad himself, these are not late scholars, yeah? Imam Ahmad himself, in his Masail, was asked, Ya Imam, okay, but what is blood impure? He said that it is agreed upon. It's ijma' that blood is impure. Imam Ahmad himself said it is ijma'. This is not me. This is not anyone else. Some of the four Imams mentioned that it's not only impure, but it's ijma', that it's haram to go upon. There's no other opinion in Islam. And today, in this school of thought, you find tens, if not more, Fatawa saying that it's fine, that blood is not impure, and the only blood that is impure is the blood of an animal when you sacrifice it. Anyway, another fatwa that goes against ijma'. Ijma', or nearly ijma', wearing gold for ladies, gold rings, to not be permissible. Another fatwa that most people don't know about, but it was a fatwa of one of the leading scholars of this. It was actually a fatwa of Sheikh Albani himself, so I'm not attacking him here, but it's interesting to know what he believed. He believes that it's compulsory to trim your beard up to the length of the fist. Even though most followers of this approach believe that you can't touch your beard at all. Albani went to the approach saying you have to trim up to your fist, So that's his, because it's the way he saw the dalil. Another one mentioned a fatwa that masturbation does not break your fast, for example. That is against, of course, the ijma' on the former madhab. That it's permissible to wipe over see-through socks with holes in them. So a sock that's see-through, leggings, for example, that has holes in it, you can still wipe it, of course. Yeah, there's no saying throughout history of Islam that says you can do that. No saying at all. There's conditions for the thing that you wipe on, but if it's see-through, it's got holes in it, then that is not in the madhab. So these are opinions that didn't exist, but according to their own istidlal, their own qiyas, the way they saw the dalil, they took these opinions, and they weren't really affected by scholars claiming to be ijma'. Some other fatawa that you don't have to repeat prayers if you miss them. You don't have to repeat them. So if you left your prayer, if you didn't pray for a day or something, you made a mistake, you made a sin, you don't have to repeat them. Another fatwa, all the madhab say you have to repeat the prayers, of course. Believing that divorce in the state of a period does not happen. If someone wants to divorce their wife, that it doesn't occur. Another fatwa, that in ihram, when a man goes to umrah, he can wear an ihram that is sewn around him, that's a skirt, it's an elastic band. It's a very famous fatwa that is used now, and that goes against the former madhab, which clearly mentioned that the principle of ihram for a man is that the thing is not sewn around him. Allowing drinking and eating to happen after the adhan of Fajr. If you have drink or food left in your bowl or left in your plate, not generally, but just if there's some left, that you can finish it off. You don't have to put it down. Now, this fatwa is built on a hadith. Okay, that says that don't rush to finish what's in your cup or what's in your bowl, what's in your cup, in your inner. Now, this hadith, the scholars of madhab know this hadith, but there's many answers to it. And I'm only mentioning this because it happens, and because Ramadan is around the corner, it's important to know the ruling of this matter. If you were to do so, according to the former madhab, you will have to repeat your day, and there's no other way around it. So don't continue to drink after the adhan of Fajr. The meaning of this hadith, according to the madhab, is number one, the Rasulullah was talking about the adhan before the time of Fajr. There's two adhans that happen, yes. The adhan of Fajr time is done before the Fajr. You can make adhan from the middle of the night if you want. It's okay for Fajr. So the adhan that's before the time of Fajr. Or okay, the hadith is not even authentic. That's the approach of the majority scholars. Say the hadith is not even authentic. This hadith, according to the majority scholars, is very weak, or is weak, and you can't build a fiqh ruling on this hadith, especially when the fiqh ruling is going to clash with a main principle of Islam. Yeah, so not eating or drinking after Fajr is established on not one dalil, not two dalils, on many adillah. Yeah, there's ijma', there's the ayah in the Quran, there's a hadith, there's the sayings of the Sahaba. There's so many things. Yeah, even you could say Amal Ahmadiyya, whatever. You could so many opinions you could use to prove that. And then this narration is not that clear, nor do we have a clear chain to it. So we can't go and what do? And demolish this principle that was built with so many dalils. That's how the madahib look at a hadith like this. Yeah. Another fatwa, that it's permissible to shorten your prayers and break fast in Ramadan if you're studying abroad, even if you study for 4 or 5 years. And a lot of students in America from certain countries, they go by this fatwa. They shorten their prayers for 4 or 5 years. They say, as long as I'm going to go back to my country one day, it's okay to shorten your prayers. Even though in the madahib, the maximum is the Hanafi madhab, which says 15 days. Yeah, but no more than that. And they break fast in Ramadan, no problem. That goes against the madhab. Also, that if you were to put your alarm clock, if you go to sleep 12 p.m. and you put your alarm clock 7 a.m. after Fajr has finished, after the time Fajr has entered, that you're kafir. You're Islam. That fatwa also goes against the four madhab. Okay. The maqasdi approach. No, this is still the same approach. Okay. I've mentioned many examples, and I don't mention just this approach has a lot of fatawa out there. The majority of fatawa on the internet that you find today is from this approach. Okay, I'm not attaching the approach, I'm looking at that approach, but I'm saying some fatawa. If you have heard this fatawa, you know which approach it's from, just to know and to understand. That's all. That's the only thing. Okay, that if a husband is to leave salah, not to pray anymore, stops praying, that the wife, if she stays with him, she's committing zina. That the marriage is broken. And the condition of breaking a marriage in Islam in the madhab is very detailed. It's not like that. The condition of saying the person is kafir and you can't be with him more is detailed. It's not like that. You can't just make a ruling like that. Anyway, wearing golden rings is haram for ladies, like I said. That it's haram to pray more than 11 rak'at. It's haram. The madhab say it's sunnah. Some people in this approach, not all of them, some of them only, not all of them, say that it's haram. Since others say that it's not better, but you shouldn't, but it's okay. That there is no zakat on tijara, so merchandise that is used in trade. You don't have to pay zakat on it when you're trading. That goes against all the form of that as well. That it's haram to do i'tikaf in other than the 3 masajid, the Masjid Haram, Masjid Nabawi, and Masjid Al-Aqsa. And that it's permissible to eat. This fatwa is used from the Dalil approach and also from the Maqasdi approach sometimes. That it's permissible to eat any meat other than pork in a restaurant found in any country, as long as the majority population is Jew or Christian. This fatwa is not only the Dalil approach, it's used in both the Dalil and Maqasdi approach, and a lot of people out there today go by this. This fatwa, according to madhab, has no room. There's no room for it at all. Yeah, the conditions of slaughtering an animal are very clear, and they don't. You cannot find a saying in the madhab that will fit into just eating in any restaurant. Go to any non-Muslim restaurant you want, sit there and just eat. No. It has to be killed in a certain way. It has to be halal. There's no way around. Okay. The Maqasdi approach. Let's go to Ijma'. So, like I said, this approach, they care about usul al-fiqh a little bit more than the Dalil approach, but more than that, they care about what's known as al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya. Al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya, which is something also established by the Madahib. The Madahib established usul al-fiqh and established Qawa'id al-Fiqh. Qawa'id al-Fiqh are rulings, general rulings, and there are smaller rulings that fall under those general rulings. For example, in Islam, al-yaqeen la yazul bil-shak. Okay, if you're certain about something, that certainty cannot be removed by doubt. That's a general ruling. Under that, you have hundreds of rulings. For example, if you make wudu and you doubt if you broke your wudu, don't worry about that doubt. Okay, if you're married and you doubt that you had divorced or not, you haven't divorced. If you enter salah and you doubt that you broke your salah or not, continue in your salah. These are all rulings that fall under the general ruling, which is al-yaqeen la yazul. They are more focused on this than they are on usul fiqh, but they focus on these two fields a lot more. Like I said, these were both established by the madahib, not by the these schools. So they add onto these qawaid, these rulings, other general rulings that they derive from the Quran and Sunnah and from the general rules of Islam, and they believe that facilitates for Islam and makes Islam leading. They have their own view when it comes to that. If they find opinions in the madahib that agree with their approach, they take it. So they say, for example, the Hanafis say it's permissible to give zakat with zakat al-fitr by cash, money. Yes or no? The Hanafis allow that. So instead of giving a few kilos of rice, you give that much money in sadaqah to the poor. In the Hanafi opinion, it's permissible. So they found that opinion in the Hanafi, and they say this opinion helps the Muslims around the world. And it's better for the poor people, because poor people, they've got rice and stuff, but they haven't got much money. They want to buy clothes, they want to buy other things, they want to benefit from the money. So it's more it benefits them more, we take the Hanafi approach. Okay? So if they find the opinion inside the madahib that works with their maslahah that they believe, they'll take it. That's okay, generally. We shouldn't really pick and choose too much, but it's not, the worst thing. If not, okay, then there's two things that they will do, okay, to achieve the superiority of Islam, or the practicality of Muslim life, or the maslahah. They might go to the extent, they can't find the opinion of madhab, of using what's called talfiq. What's talfiq? Talfiq is when you mix up two halves of two different opinions to make a new opinion that didn't exist before. For example, if someone wants to get married, according to the Hanafi madhab, the wife does not need a wali. What's a wali? A guardian. According to the Maliki madhab, you don't need witnesses. You don't need shuhud. All you have to do is before they live together, they have to let people know. But you don't need witnesses to be there in the nikah. So if someone takes the Hanafi opinion and doesn't have a wali, and they take the Maliki opinion and don't have witnesses, what happens? They just get together and get married with no one else there. This doesn't agree with any madhab. The Hanafi say it's wrong and the Maliki say it's wrong. That's called talfiq. You're making up a new opinion built on two existing opinions. Okay, this, according to the madhab, majority of scholars, okay, in usul fiqh, 90%, 99%, they say this is not permissible. Okay, it's not permissible to do so, to make up new sayings from old sayings. So the scholars try their best to stay away from this as much as possible. This approach uses it a lot. The Dalil approach also uses it when they're making their own ijtihad and they don't find an opinion, but they find the Quran Sunnah and they believe that their interpretation tells you that, they'll use that as well. But this approach uses it a lot more. Okay, also, if they can't find sayings with talfiq, they might go to rediscovering the matter and looking into it and doubting the ijma' that was mentioned. There's ijma' in the mas'ala, according to the scholars of madhab. They could doubt that and then go and invest the mas'ala and try to come up with a solution and different interpretation from the Quran and Sunnah and from the general adillah from Islam and the maslahah and all these other things. There's many examples for that. Okay. Some examples. A fatwa that says that the lady, the ransom, blood money of the lady is the same as the man. So this fatwa is built on saying that in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, for example, the ladies didn't have as much responsibilities as the men had. It was different. In that case, there was less, but or something like that. I don't know, some kind of explanation like that. Yeah, I don't remember the wording. Okay, but today things have changed. Ladies or lady's situation is different, or the status of lady has changed, or I don't know, something like that. So it's the same. That goes against all the formula. Why does the amount of money differ? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in that. Yeah, we don't need to go into details. A fatwa, this fatwa is not a general fatwa. This fatwa was given to one lady. Okay, it's not a general fatwa that they give, but one of them gave it to a general lady, and she could stay with her non-Muslim husband in the house after he has accepted, after she accepts Islam, and she doesn't have to leave because it's too hard for her and stuff like that. It's not a general fatwa. They don't give this fatwa. Yes, it was given to a special lady. I don't know the situation of the fatwa, but that fatwa doesn't agree with them. Even if they don't do anything together, but just living in their house and basically not having the Islamic boundaries isn't permissible. That a Muslim can inherit a non-Muslim relative if they're living overseas to strengthen Islam. Okay, that living in the West makes it permissible for a Muslim to deal with riba, to deal with interest. So you can deal with haram riba if you're living in the West, in order for the Muslims to gain power. Now, the Hanafi madhab has certain details when it comes to dealing with non-Muslims and stuff like that. This approach is not because of the Hanafi madhab, but it's just for the maslaha of the Muslims, and that's it. Okay, summaries on this topic. There's so much to talk about, but generally, what I have included here is that the three schools stem from sincere care about the ummah. They care about the ummah. And the leaders of these schools do care. They're not people who are trying to attack Islam, okay? But we have to stand somewhere. Just because people have good intention doesn't mean that we can't have a stance. And the leaders have spent a lot of time and thought to what they believe is a solution for the problem of the ummah, okay? The madahib, schools of madahib believe that when the madahibs were attacked, okay, and when people destroyed the madahib and they attacked the madahib and lied about the madahib, this has caused a lot of confusion, and that they spent a lot of time clearing the names of the madahib, and this could have been used in developing the madahib and making the madahib even stronger, and the new masail, the new matters that happened, all being clear in the madahib, and people would not need to go into these extents that we have today. Understanding the origins of what you study and who you are studying under and the chain of relation is essential for safety of the deen. There's nothing wrong with asking the person who you study under, fiqh, okay, what are you teaching me? What is your chain of narration? Where does your fiqh go back to? Okay, is this approach of your mashayikh, their ijtihad, and that's it? Or does it have, do you go back to an old school of thought that, you can ask them? Memorizing sayings and reading books and listening to lectures can give you pieces of information, okay? So you find that, subhanAllah, the scholars of these schools, they all have a lot of information, yeah? They all read lots of books, lots of lectures, PhDs, no problem. But the difference is really the school that they were grounded in. When you ground yourself in a school and you build yourself in a school, especially if the school has a chain of narration that goes back to the first few generations, then your knowledge will be a lot more fruitful. All approaches appreciate the Four Imams' works. Okay, there are some people, individuals in the Dalil approach who look down upon Abu Hanifah, rahimahullah. But that is not the majority of them. So it's not fair for me to say that they all do that. Yes. Some of them have made takfir on Abu Hanifah. That's extreme. That is bid'ah. That's dalal. But the majority of them don't do that. So I'm not going to attack the whole school just because a few ignorant individuals did that. Yeah. So the approach of the four is to appreciate the Four Imams' works in fiqh. The books and teachings of usul al-fiqh and qawa'id al-fiqh presented in the four madhabs are a starting point for the majority. So the madahib are really essential to all four. Alhamdulillah, these madahib have proved themselves to be essential for anyone who ever wants to enter the world of knowledge. The richness in the madahib cannot be found in anywhere else. Subhanallah, starting point for everyone. Those who reject taqleed, following the madhabs, try to choose from the sayings of madhab when they can. It's an important point. So the first choice for everyone would be the madhab. And that also shows you the strength of these madhab that we are studying. Alhamdulillah. One of the differences in ijtihad between the madhab and others is that the madhab look at the dalil, the proofs, in a way that they are seeing all the proofs together at one time. The madhab is not one scholar by himself, yeah? The imams do that themselves. Then they have the scholars of the madhab following up on the imam's work. So, subhanAllah, the way they see dalil is different than individuals looking into dalil themselves and just taking from the dalil. The scholars of the madhab, including the late ones, have been accused of not following the dalil, the proof from Quran and Sunnah, just because they follow madhab, as if they're two different things. After studying and reading and researching, and myself being with people from both schools, and studying under people from both schools, and studying in the institutions from both schools, the madhabs are more focused on dalil than anyone else. That's the truth. So we can't say they don't follow dalil just because they follow madhab. But the way they understand dalil is unique and different. That's all it is. Every madhab has books that are written just for the dalil of the madhab themselves. And the commenters of hadith are all followers of the madhab. So in the Shafi'i madhab, you have books that are written about the dalils that are mentioned inside this book in Shafi'i fiqh. They don't put all the dalil in the books of fiqh. Because if they did that, books of fiqh are already so huge and long. If they did that, how much, fiqh is going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. The other approach is that you should mention the dalil with fiqh, yeah? But the details in fiqh in the madhab that I mentioned don't allow them to put dalil in there as well. You have to memorize these sayings first, and then you go on to another level when you understand the dalil of the saying. Yeah, that's a later level. But you need to memorize the sayings first. The madhabi books in fiqh are built in a way which dalil, like I said, and proofs are studied outside books of fiqh and not in fiqh in beginner levels. Later on they do, but in the beginning they don't. In big books of fiqh they do. The difference between the ummah is something that has had many attempts to eliminate. But most attempts throughout history have made the differences larger, haven't changed them, okay? And there's more difference now than there was upon the madhab. Choosing one approach in fiqh does not mean that you undermine the work of the scholars in other fields, okay? So just because someone had an approach, for example, we said Sheikh Qaradawi, he's got a lot of great work in da'wah. Yeah, he spent his whole life, rahimahullah, he died very recently, in da'wah. We're not saying anything like that, yeah? Albani spent his time in hadith and stuff like that. We're not saying anything about that. We're not attacking individuals, yeah? But there's nothing wrong with academically looking into the approaches of fiqh, understanding where we stand and where they stand, and trying to, inshallah ta'ala, understand how Fuqaha were produced throughout the history of Islam. There needs to be healthy discussions like this between students of knowledge and the teachers, and it shouldn't be something that we are sensitive about and that is taboo, that khalas. We're accepting, that means we don't have an opinion and we don't talk, even though people from the other schools are very open about their opinions. They can attack the madhab as they want, it's fine. So it should be something fair for every Muslim to have their opinion and not something that we should shy off from, inshallah ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah. We have finished the 3 classes and finished the other, alhamdulillah. And that's really, look, there's so much to talk about in this topic. And there's so many books written on different aspects on the history of fiqh. But inshallah ta'ala, this is just a glimpse for those who are interested in studying fiqh, or not interested in studying fiqh, but interested in listening about what fiqh is about out there. What fiqh is about out there. It's important for every person to understand. Inshallah, after Ramadan, inshallah, we'll go back to fiqh or usul fiqh, inshallah ta'ala. And we would recommend anyone studying that book to listen to this, inshallah ta'ala, so that when we're studying madhab, we understand what a madhab is about and what it means and how they came to us, inshallah ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam, wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Any questions?
Yes. This one in particular he had the Madhhabi for several centuries.
Yes.
Do we know what led to the Dalil approach?
No. So well, there's a few things, but that's this is my own opinion. The Dalil approach was very famous amongst the so subhanAllah, it had different stages, like I said, through history, the Zahiris and others, but you have people like Muhammad Abdul-Rahman, for example. His movement in Najd, when he started, they had a lot of connections with Zaydi scholars like Shawkani and San'ani and others. Okay, so they were originally following the Hanbali madhab, but then in certain matters you find them going and using the same principles the Zaydis had and the Zahiris had, and some opinions that were mentioned by Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah, he was a Hanbali scholar, of course. He wasn't Dalil approach, but he had some opinions, individual opinions, that went against the madhab a little bit, that the scholars of the Hanbali madhab didn't really agree upon. They endorsed all of these opinions strongly. They endorsed them all. So they weren't strict Hanbalis in that way, but they went against the Hanbali madhab in certain matters and issues. This started, okay, at the start, and in the second and third generation, it grew a lot. It grew a lot. So at the start, there were Hanbali with exceptions. They wouldn't follow the Hanbali madhab in everything, yeah? They would still have the Dalil on the side. Later on, it became a Dalil there and the Hanbalis on the side. So the Hanbali madhab was even weaker. For example, like I said, they differ. It's a spectrum. Ibn Baz's teacher, Muhammad ibn Ibrahim rahimahullah, he used to be the Mufti of Saudi Arabia, for example. He used to be more Hanbali than Dalil approach, for example. You find he used to give fatwa that divorce, if a man divorces his wife 4 times in one sitting, 3 times in one sitting, they all happen. It's 3 times, yeah, which is the 4 madhab approach. Ibn Baz followed the approach of Ibn Taymiyyah that says no, it's only 1. So he kicked Ibn Baz out of Riyadh at that time. Ibn Baz was the next mufti, yeah, because of his fatwa. So he's like, you can't go against the Hanbali madhab in this. You can't just follow Ibn Taymiyyah's opinion for this. He was very strict in the Hanbali approach. When Ibn Baz came into power and he was the judge and the mufti of that time, he brought that opinion back, of course, and it was very strong in his time. And also, you had other people like Al-Albani, for example, who wasn't originally Hanbali at all. He didn't have that same Najdi approach that was part Hanbali. He was fully, Malik Ahl Hadith, didn't follow any madhab. He refused the madhab totally. Okay, so it's a spectrum, like I said. But at that time, Ibn Baz, Ibn Uthaymin, Albani, which is the 3rd generation, they were not third, more than that. They were all advocates of this approach, and they were the main in that region, in Saudi Arabia and that area. They were the main voices. So a lot outcome came there. Now in Saudi Arabia itself, if you go to universities, you find a lot of them going back to the Hanbali madhab. So that was one of the reasons, I think, that at that time, and it was a very time of a lot of differences in the Ummah at that time, and a lot of fighting and stuff happened. So that was one of the reasons, I guess, that made it so widespread. In the chat, inshallah. The question is, why did Ibn Abdul Wahhab endorse those specific opinions that Ibn Taymiyyah had from the Hanbali, not the other Hanbali opinions? So Ibn Abdul Wahhab did endorse a lot of Hanbali opinions, but personally, I see him to be, or his school to be more followers of Ibn Taymiyyah than they are of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah ta'ala. So this is not him himself generally, but his followers more. His followers, if Ibn Taymiyyah said something and Imam Ahmad said something, generally that would be with Ibn Taymiyyah. Yeah, that's why it's fair to say that this school of thought is more of a Taymi school of thought, Taymiyyah school of thought. So a lot of them, especially modern ones, they go to the extent of being complete followers of Ibn Taymiyyah. So anyway, I'm not here to attack anyone. This is just academic, and this is what it can be found out there, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on everyone. Inshallah, we'll a question asked, can we call the Maqasdi approach the liberal fiqh approach? I don't know, I think it's a bit harsh. It's called the Maqasdi approach. Yeah, so Maqasid is the general points that the Sharia wants to reach. The Maqsad, the goals. Yeah, the goals of Islam are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Islam wants to reach this. So we've got to focus on these goals so we can reach the goals. They're saying that if you don't focus on the goals, you're not going to reach the goals, basically. Yeah. The madhab approach would be what the answer would be that these madhab are leading to those goals. Don't worry. Yeah. So anyway, that's how we could, in a nutshell, we could summarize it in that way, inshallah. But alhamdulillah, let's also another question. Is Ibn Hazm and the Zahiri approach completely the same? No. The Zahiri madhab started early on in Islam, and the start of this madhab was Imam Dawood ibn Ali al-Zahiri. He was a student of Imam Shafi'i. Okay, Dawood al-Zahiri is a great Imam, and he's a mujtahid. He could be followed, even though his principles do not agree 100% with the principles of the majority of scholars. Ibn Hazm came very late. Okay, not very late, but late on the Imam Dawood. And Ibn Hazm didn't follow Dawood. Ibn Hazm said it's haram to follow anyone. Ibn Hazm had his own opinions, and Ibn Hazm's opinions used to clash with usul al-fiqh in every single madhab out there. So his book, he has a book in fiqh that is around till today. It's printed, especially in the Dalil approach, like his books a lot. Okay, Al-Muhalla bil-Athar, it's called Al-Muhalla bil-Athar. Ibn Hazm's books. In this book, you find him mentioning very harsh things towards the madhab. You say like an opinion of the madhab, he'll say, no Muslim would even say that. And he'll say like, he's uffin wa tuffin ala hadha al-qawl. He say like, and you say to this opinion, one of the opinion of Abu Hanifah, for example, okay, say uff to this saying, and say tuff means like they spit on this saying, or woe to this, to someone who would say this saying is, so he would attack the opinions of fiqh with no problem. And he had opinions that no one said before him. So the scholars of Islam refused Ibn Hazm's approach to fiqh, to usul al-fiqh, and even to aqidah from his day till today. So it's not the same as Allah. Ibn Hazm was a scholar, but they said the main issue with Ibn Hazm was that he didn't study ilm through a chain of narration. Most of his ilm was reading books. When you read a lot of books, you get a lot of knowledge, but you might not know how to organize that knowledge and how to that's why I said studying a systematic way is so important, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, inshallah, we end here. Allah ta'ala a'lam, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.